tonight on Pen the Writer's Utopia. Y'all, I'm so excited. It's our season finale, and you know I had to end it with an amazing bang. So hang in there with me tonight as we talk about preparing your project for the red pen. This is going to be an amazing episode. You know what to do. Go ahead and share it, like it, share it with your friends and family. Make sure that whoever needs to hear this tonight knows, all right? And with that said, come on into the Utopia, y'all. Welcome to Pen the Writer's Utopia. We have an amazing show in store for you guys tonight. Listen, my special guest for our season finale, I'm super excited to have her with me. Listen, she's an educator, she's an author, she's a writer, y'all. She's even an editor. And tonight, we're talking about preparing your project for the red pen. Please, Utopia family, help me welcome none other than Miss Alexis Dobbins. Hey, Alexis, how are you?
I am fine. I'm excited about tonight. I didn't know you were ending your season. A little bit of pressure, but I'm excited. You and I start talking about writing, and we just kind of flow. So I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be good.
Listen, I thought that you were the perfect guest to have for the season finale. We have had an amazing season this year. Some amazing writers and authors. I mean, writers from all different mediums. We've had screenwriters, we've had authors. Listen, it's been amazing. And I said, why not bring an editor into the game? Because that is one of the most important parts of writing, no matter what genre, what medium you're writing in. Having an editor is the most important part of it all, because they are the ones that come in, help to mold, shape, and proof the body of work. So I'm super excited to have you and to have this conversation with you tonight. And I thought there's no better way than to end the season with bang. So with that being said, I know a lot about you, but our audience does not. So can you take a few minutes and just tell us a tad bit about who Alexis is?
Sure. It's every time I'm asked to do that, I look at it in waves or in segments. Started out working in public broadcasting for about the first professional wave. Was in public broadcasting for about 15, 16 years. Really enjoyed that, but wanted to do something in terms of education a little bit closer, kind of more directly.
Yeah.
So I left public broadcasting, slew of classes I needed to take because I did not go to school for education. And ultimately ended up being an educator. But even while in public broadcasting, while taking classes, while in grad school, throughout all of that, I was always writing and editing.
Yeah.
Always have that red pen, as you say.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times that was the revenue source, actually, was editing while I was moving through those courses. Right now, I am a full-time educator, high school, love it, love my babies. We're coming up to graduation, so I'm happy for them, but a little bit sad to see some of my seniors go.
Yeah.
I also started a publishing company back in, I want to say 2006, 2007. So I have writers that I have published. I have writers that I work with in terms of editing that they're like my stable base. Do freelance editing, as you know.
Yeah.
And on one of the projects, I decided to actually, we had gone back and forth, and it was like, okay, it's time for me to really be listed as a co-author because I've done so much work on this project. But again, no matter what I'm doing, there are always two things that if you know me, they're present. One is reading and one is writing. No matter what I'm
Necessary.
doing, yeah. That's my life breath. I also work with parents and other educators. I have the newest initiative that I'm started last year doing virtual, this period of virtual learning, and you were a guest on my show. Uh,
Yes.
Hello, I'm a parent, and that came from uh, seeing the need to support parents around this whole idea of virtual learning. And I'll come back and talk about that a little bit more, but it just fit very nicely again into that theme of reading and writing. So
Yeah. And that's amazing. So I just learned something. Look, y'all, I just learned something about her tonight too. So you started out in public broadcasting.
mhm,
Wow.
mhm, mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I worked at PBS for 8 or 9 years. And then I was working on a project, and they asked me to move from the public broadcasting service to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is where the money goes. The money is dispersed through CPB.
Yeah.
And a lot of the shows you watch, you'll hear brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But even there, I was involved in developing educational services. Digital broadcasting was new. And so that was my baby for like 6 years, was getting digital equipment, digital capability to stations around the country. But at that time, the focus was how can digital broadcasting support education? Uh,
Mm.
and that's I was telling somebody, I think there's one state in the United States that I haven't been to because I spent so much time going to stations around the country, helping them determine what they were going to do with this new way of broadcasting and how it could help education.
Awesome. Awesome. So you have a heck of a resume, man. Like from public broadcasting to being an educator to being a publisher, then going on to be an editor, now being an educator of high school students. Listen, that red pen of yours has been very active for many,
Yeah,
many years
yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's always a red pen somewhere in my bag for
Somewhere.
purse. Always.
Yes. And something else that you said that is very key, and I loved it, and that was reading and writing are so important. Like you can't just I know there are a lot of writers. And I know some of you guys are watching. Some of them are part of the Utopia family,
Mm,
where they're writers, but they don't like to read. You know, some writers try to stay away from reading because they don't want their work to be influenced by someone else's writing. And sometimes I get that, right?
mhm,
But I really do believe that it's important to read because that's where you get certain examples, especially when it comes to standards for public media, so to speak. You know, when you're writing a book, there's a standard. When you're writing a screenplay, there's a standard. There's an industry standard for almost everything. And if you're not at least paying attention or reading some material along those lines, you really don't understand or are not able to grasp, in my opinion, you're really not able to grasp get a grasp on the industry standards. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I always, and I hear people say, I hear two primary things that I hear as an editor. One is that I love to write, but I don't like to read, as you
Yeah.
just said.
Hmm.
Um, and while at certain stages in a project, I understand that if you want to step away from everything that's been written on a particular topic, or you want to make sure that nothing is clouding your voice, that's fine.
Right.
But as you just said, I don't know how you um, can be a writer and just not have exposure to the standard to the particular genre that you're writing in, to understand both what's been done, what not to do, what's a good way to do this. And once you have that background, then you can build your voice around that.
Yeah.
The other thing is when people say, I know what I wanted to say, so I don't need an editor. Really? No. And that is not to say that somebody is not an excellent writer, but there's nothing like having a unbiased, open mind look at the skill-based pieces of writing.
Yeah.
That you meant to say that, but you didn't necessarily say that because you've been listening to this voice giving you this story for months or years. And so it's not a personal thing. But if you're going to put a product out there, you want it to be the best representation of the story that you want to tell. Okay.
And I totally agree with you there. Like, when it comes to editing, I look at it like this. There's the editing that a lot of people, especially when it comes to published works, a lot of people have that theory of the publishing company where literally you write a book and then they'll come back and read it and be like, oh no, in order for me to publish this, you're going to make this change, that change. And then they take away from the intention of your project. But that's not what editors really go for, in all honesty. Now, if you're writing for a publishing company and you're under a contract and they're paying you, then you got to dance to their beat, just like any other medium. If you're writing for someone else, you got to dance to their beat, so to speak. But when it comes to you publishing or producing your own works, you want somebody to go back and check behind you. Like, that's different. The editor is not there to change your work. It's just like you said, they're there to enhance, take what you have written and mold it and shape it into this beautiful masterpiece that your intention is, rather than having it go out looking like a hot mess with a bunch of typos. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, if I'm reading a book and it has a million typos in it, I lose interest. Or if it has a bunch of misspelled words, I lose interest, because now I'm distracted by all of these errors that have taken me away from what could have been a beautiful piece of work had you taken the time to at least trust somebody to review your work and proofread your work.
Right. And as you know, there are different types of editing, but at the very least, you want to get that proofing done.
Yes.
Because it's difficult to proof your own work. I have a hard time proofing my own work.
Yeah.
But it's almost like baking a cake, and the cake is delicious. It's a mouth-watering cake. But you are a baker, but you didn't go to the class on icing. You just you don't like icing. You want to bake cakes. And so you decide, I'm going to do the best icing I can and put it on my cake because I know the cake is delicious.
Yeah.
So when people eat the cake, I'm going to be good. I'm golden because I know my cake is on point. That may be true. But when you present the cake with the icing, if the icing is not on point, nobody gets to the cake. The message, the flavor, all of that work that you put in the cake is gone out the window because people take 2 bites of that icing and then it's a wrap. So I like to think of it as an editor, you're really developing the look, the feel, the flow of the material. We can't tell your story. It's your story. And a good editor knows what to kind of manipulate and what to massage and what to leave alone.
Yeah.
But your story deserves that effort if you want people to receive your story and to really be excited about it and to get your vision. Your book deserves some degree of editing.
I totally agree with you. And something else that I'm gonna go back and grab real quick. As we were talking about knowing industry standards for the things that you want to do, a prime example, and it's full disclosure. When I first started out, I wanted to be a screenwriter. I was writing plays, right? But my only example that I had ever seen of a play was what we were reading in our literature books. And as you know, in the literature books, it's not written out in true play or stage play or screenplay format.
Right.
It's condensed and it's written out, Alexis dot colon blah blah blah, and then the next line. And so when I was great, I am great. I'm a great writer, and I wrote my play, but I wrote it according to what I had seen in literature books.
Right.
And I entered it into a competition. Now, I got into that I won. I made it into the group to be able to participate because I believe these people looked at me and said, "This girl can write."
And right.
However, the most embarrassing thing for me, which made me want to turn around and leave, if I be honest, was when I got in there because I presented it as a screenplay because that's what it was. It was a short film screenplay, what I knew it to be. And when I got in there, Alexis, I was totally embarrassed. You know why? Because my 10 pages, my script was 10 pages. And when they said submit your first 10 pages, I was like, well, my whole play is only 10 pages. My whole screenplay is 10 pages. And these other people had it in the proper format, and their 10 pages compared to I told a whole story in my 10 pages, and their 10 pages was the first 10 minutes of their movie.
Right. Exactly.
I was embarrassed. You know what I mean?
It is nothing to be embarrassed about, but that's a great example. It's a completely different type of writing, completely. Yeah. And that's one of the other things if somebody is looking for an editor, you want to get the editor who specializes in what you're doing. If you're writing a script, you probably are not looking for a person who is getting rave reviews for novels and prose. I mean, maybe they can do all of that, but you want to make sure that they can edit in terms of script, that they understand that there are going to be instructions, there's going to be a setting, there's going to be direction given, and where is all of this in my script, in my screenplay? And that looks very different from the traditional, this paragraph follows that paragraph follows that paragraph.
Right.
And it's doing a little bit of research, but you want to make sure that what your project needs is what you give it. So that again, you get the best cake out there. And ultimately, when somebody tastes your cake or reads your project, they are very satisfied.
Absolutely. So let's talk about those different, let's dive a little bit deeper into the types of editing, right? So you have I'll just say the short and sweet editing, which is your proofreading. That means you have presented a manuscript that's ready to rock and roll, and you're just looking for someone to basically make sure your commas and your punctuation is in the right place, and just make sure you haven't fat fingered a word, that still, you didn't use their THEIR instead of their THERE, right? So they're just going behind you to make sure that, because when you're writing, you've seen it a million times and you know what your intended thing was, right? Your intended wording was, but sometimes your eyes see the letters the way they should be and not actually what they look like on the page. How do I know? Because that has happened to me, right? So everybody knows about proofreading, but let's talk about the other types of editing. So tell us more about the types. I know there's developmental that you need to do, and what are the types? So what exactly is developmental, and what are some other types that people need to know about?
I tend to, and I'll just use myself as an example, I tend to offer 3 primary sources of editing. And one of those, as you just talked about, I don't need to go back over there. You've done an excellent job. It's what we call proofreading. It's where you're looking for, okay, so that's one type of editing. Then another type of editing is what I refer to as substantive. And in substantive editing, I'm looking for not only the errors in grammar and that sort of thing, but I'm also looking to see that if Joe's name was Joe on page 2, All of a
Ah,
sudden, his name didn't become Larry on page 3. Now that sounds silly, but that happens.
that happens, especially in fiction. That can
That
definitely happen
happens.
in
That
fiction.
happens.
Uh-huh.
So Joe has to be Joe, consistent, and maybe depending on what you're writing, if somebody is developing, somebody maybe is being stern, so they call Joe Joseph. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about a full name change for an individual.
Right.
If it's, spring on this page, and then in the same chapter, it's summer, and there's no obvious path as to how we got from spring to summer. Those are the kinds of things. Continuity is what I'm
Yeah.
looking for. I'm looking for continuity. I'm looking for consistency. If you are a person who uses chapter at the top of each chapter, maybe you have chapter 2, then you have chapter 3, and you're spelling the words out. Then all of a sudden you get to chapter 4, and you're like, I'm thinking I'd like to use that Roman numeral look. I like that. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to pick one, and we're going
And
to be
do it. Yeah.
consistent with that. I'm looking for things like a paragraph that almost ends at the bottom of page 20, and then at the top of page 21, there's just one line. Now, that might be something that I'm going to manipulate, or that might be just a note to the person who's laying the book out that says that you've got a widow or an orphan here somewhere, and let's move that over, or we got to adjust that because you got this one line hanging there. If, for example, you have a chapter, nothing makes me scratch as an editor more than seeing a book that could be because I believe that if a person has a story to tell, there's somebody out there who needs to read the story.
Exactly. I agree. Mm-hmm.
It's not always 20 million people, but there's somebody who is willing and needs to receive the information that you're sharing. But one of my pet peeves is reading a book and the beginning of a chapter is on the left-hand side. Now I'm scratching because I need to move that over there. Okay, look, don't do that. Just get over there where you belong. So substantive, I'm looking for grammatical errors. I'm catching those, but I'm also looking for consistency, elements that are the same. Sometimes I may point out where characters are doing different things. This doesn't really run true to that character. And then the third one, which would be developmental, is where I'm and they build on each other. They kind of scaffold on each other. So developmental, I'm doing substantive with another layer on top of that, because I might tell you the flow of this just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I see what you're trying to do, and it was okay till we got to this chapter, but there's no way that we would know this unless this occurred back in chapter 1 or 2. So what I'm
Basically putting it together,
right,
putting it in
that's
order.
what I call the
Mm-hmm.
flow. And if the
Yeah.
flow doesn't work, again, as you said, it can be a good story, but you don't want your reader to get confused, because once your reader gets confused,
They shut
it's
down.
too easy to put the book down. It's too
Mm-hmm.
easy. And it doesn't mean that you didn't have a good story. It just means that somewhere the storyline went askew a little bit. And now the two things that you want the reader to do as they're reading your book, you want them to want to find out what the characters are doing and where they're going. You want them to be eager and anticipate and look forward to that. But
Yeah.
you also want them you want them to feel like they are learning about these people as they're reading. And when I look for flow, I want to make sure that I get a sense of who these people are, that your character development is on point, that and I'm going to come back to the word flow, that the story just moves in a direction that keeps me wanting more. And so
Absolutely.
that's developmental. And I
Now,
generally offer those three.
now, piggybacking on that a little bit. So we're talking about character development, and so that kind of leans people into more fiction, right? But what about our nonfiction writers? What does development look like for our nonfiction writers? That, yes, the same difference. I think the same thing that applies for fiction can be applied to biographies. But for people that are writing books that are more instructional, or maybe not instructional, but they're more self-help, or they're giving information, what are some of the things they need to be careful of when working or looking at the development of their books? You know what I mean? Making sure as far as their content that they're giving, what are some of the common things that people go wrong with nonfiction books?
In writing a nonfiction book, I should be able to ask you who's your audience, and you should be able to tell me.
That's big.
If you tell me your audience is everybody, okay, so no, it's not. Okay, love you, but it's not. Okay. It's in your head when you wrote the book. Like, who's going to read this book and their life is going to change? Because that's your audience. Your audience is in everybody all over the world. And I suffer with this too. I struggle with that too. Because it's like, well, can help this person, help that. Okay, who was your audience? Who was in your head when you were writing your book? And if you know that, and you can tell the editor that right there is half the battle. Because in a nonfiction project, you want to know who your audience is, because that determines the type of language that you use. That determines, because it really is the same in that you are still moving people along the points of a story. There's a storyline, and you are moving people along the points of a story. I have done a fair amount of what would be called technical writing. So you start here, sort of at the bottom, and then okay, so now that you know that, you will be able to do this. You will be able to do this. What you can't do, as an example, if you are writing a book teaching someone how to use Microsoft Excel, you cannot address formulas in the first chapter. Because where do the formulas go? Like,
how did we even get there? Yeah, how do we even get there?
Where's the formula bar? Where they go? That kind of thing. And so that, when we talk about, there is a flow to nonfiction writing as well. You just have to know who is your audience, what is my message, and now how have I laid it out so that folks are interested and they are learning in a scaffolded fashion. But I'm telling a story, but it's a story that has truth to it. It is a story that is based on fact, but there's still something at the end of the book that I want them to know. I want them to know how to do this. I want them to know what to do when their marriage is falling apart. I want them to know what are some of the ways that they can help their children engage in and have a desire to learn. There's always a goal. You just have to know what the goal is. And then an editor is going to come in and say, okay, we're moving up. Okay, this doesn't belong here. And a lot of times an editor will say, this doesn't address your goal. This doesn't really fit. This doesn't have anything to do with what you said you wanted to do. If you're trying to tell people how to, I do a lot of work with co-parenting. If you're trying to help a mom and dad who don't live together work together to support their children, it's probably, you're not going to have a chapter in there that talks about the top 12 places to meet a new man or to meet a new woman.
Right. Right.
Okay. Not a bad topic.
It doesn't have anything to do with
it. That goes in your next book. That doesn't go in that book. And so I think that's one of the reasons why people sometimes have a crinkly face when it comes to editing, because they feel that people are going to try and come in and tell them what they need to write. And that's not what an editor does. An editor just helps you focus on your message, on your story, and then helps you shape it so that it's the best story ever,
Mhm.
and increases the chances that the person who needs to read your project is going to get it.
Absolutely. You have thoroughly broken it down. And I'm sitting here looking like, oh my gosh, like this conversation has been so great and so informative. And like literally, we are out of time. But that's okay because there are a few things I definitely want to make sure we touch on before we go. So, and it's the season finale, so we can go a little over. Now, you have a book your own self coming out very soon, and so is there anything that you can share with us about that, or give a little teaser to whet the palate until the book is released?
Okay, sure, I can. And we've been talking about editing the whole time, and I will tell you, as an editor, that's my difficulty in writing and releasing a book,
Mm.
because the first thing that they tell you as a writer is to just write.
Do not self edit. I was about to ask you, are you guilty of that?
I just can't even explain. And I will tell myself, do not. I published a book for my niece, and she's like, "What are you like? Why isn't what?" Anyway, yeah, that's hard for me. Let me say that it's very hard for me. I have a children's book that I'm waiting for an illustrator, but that's a separate project. But um, school is coming out, and then I expect it's going to be out in June or the first part of July. It is called 52 Problems. And you quoted one of the examples earlier today when you talked about yeah, you did, when you talked about the use of THEIR and
Mhm.
THERE. And 52 Problems looks at 52 of the most common grammatical errors that people make, either because they don't know, or they're rushing, or they're just not really focused. And it's a cute but thorough resource guide,
Okay.
um, that you can just pick it up. I 52 of them, one for each week if you are somebody who's really focused on improving your grammar and your writing. Talk about how to use it, how not to use it, how to spell it, how not to spell it. And then next week you go on to the next one. So I'm really excited about that because I envision it as a tool that people can have at their desk or in their office. And the thing that I really like about it is that my audience for the book, which I had to struggle with, is professional men and women, as well as college students who are writing papers and need something that they can pick up and look at real quick and just keep it moving.
I was about to say, I think that is excellent. And that's a good resource to have, especially for, like you said, in the workplace, because when you're firing off those emails, you definitely, there are people who are new to desk jobs, new to the email world, don't know email etiquette. And it's very easy to do that, to make common grammatical mistakes in your emails when you're in the workplace. So I think that's great. But I also like that I'm sitting here in my mind thinking that's great for people who feel like, well, I'm not a writer, but I have a story to tell. That would be phenomenal for them to help them in their journey of writing their projects too. So I can
Um,
see how I know you have your niche audience, but I can see how it can help everyone.
and that's okay if there's some spillage, but in corporate America, there is nothing that can stall a person's career as quickly as their writing.
Yes.
And people are not going to tell you necessarily that
They
you're
just gonna
writing,
talk about you.
but they're going to judge the there
Mm-hmm.
and the there,
Mm-hmm.
or the relevant versus relevant.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to judge that. And they might not say anything, but now you're working upstream to get past whatever's lodged in their head about your ability.
Yep.
And let's move that barrier off the table. Let's put that issue away. Okay, let's just grab this little book and okay, that's what okay, and then keep it moving.
I love it. I love that. 52 problems, you guys. All you working professionals and writers out there that just need that extra resource guide, look out for that. It was coming soon. And as you can see, it's going to be a resource that will help you along your career and your journey. Listen, Alexis, it has been amazing talking to you tonight. I feel like we could go on. Like, I'm like, man, I don't want to end, but I know I have to. But before we do, I definitely want to do what I always do, which is allow you. Do you have one golden nugget of wisdom that you would love to share with the viewers tonight before we go?
Sure. I would say, and I'm focusing this on writers because that's what we're talking about. And the one thing that I would tell someone who is thinking about writing, and I think I've already dropped the one nugget that I'm going to share, but just to make sure that everybody has heard it, is that don't talk yourself out of getting your voice on paper.
Ooh.
Somewhere, somebody is going to be the better for what you have to share. Every experience that you've gone through is going to help somebody else. There's nothing that you haven't experienced that somebody else either has been there or will be there or knows somebody who is there. So I just want to encourage people who, I'm not a writer, I'm not sure anybody will buy it, all those sorts of things. Focus on getting your story on paper. Find somebody that you connect with, you vibe with, you're able to trust them, get that thing edited, and then release it into the world. Okay, we have a tendency as writers to worry about what's going to happen when it gets out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not our issue. Our job is to write it
Story
and let it go.
Yep.
Release it, and someone will read it and it will get where it needs to go.
I love that. I love that. I love it. Listen, that was such a good nugget. I'm gonna tell y'all, if you didn't write that down, you're gonna have to go back, rewind it back, and write that down. That was so good. Someone, we always say that though, someone needs to hear your story. But you're right. Our job as writers at the end of the day is to write the story, because our stories will find the person and the audience that it needs to address. It will find its way there.
It will find its
It
way.
will. It's not your job to worry about it getting there. Your job is to get the story out so that it can be shared. That was some amazing advice. She has been dropping nuggets. Like she said, she's been dropping nuggets this whole time, y'all. If you missed it or if you came in late, make sure you rewind it back, go back and catch the replay, honey, because she gave some great information for all of our writers out there, regardless of whether you're writing business, whether you're writing a screenplay. Editing is a part of the job, okay? It's part of your project, making it to its destination. You don't want to skip it because it may make your audience skip you if you do.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. You may see that again in print somewhere.
Hey, I learned that.
I'll give you credit though, but I like that.
Yeah. Listen, so it has been an amazing episode. You know what to do, Utopia family. If you have enjoyed and appreciate the information that Alexis has shared tonight, please make sure you go on in the comments and give her a nice hand clap so she can feel the love, okay? Alexis, for those that want to reach out to you, if they're looking for an editor, how can they get in contact with you?
My email account, I like live by email. I wake up like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to emails coming in. But the easiest one, I have several, but the easiest one is alexis.dobbins@gmail.com. On both Facebook and IG, I have accounts that really focus on the work that I'm doing with parents. So for both of those, if you search on Hello, I'm a Parent, you can reach me that way, both on Facebook and on IG. But if you have questions or you're really interested in an editing conversation, the best way to do it, the most direct way to do it, is to just email me at alexis.dobbins@gmail.com.
alexis.dobbins@gmail.com. You got it.
Yes,
Well, I have certainly appreciated you. Listen, y'all, make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that 52 problems because it will be coming your way soon. I have so appreciated you, Alexis. Thank you so much for joining me. And listen, guys, I know you're like, oh man, it's the season finale. I know, but guess what? We have tons of amazing episodes to keep you busy over the coming weeks while we're on break. Make sure you go back and check them out. We've had so many different writers to grace our room, our writers room, and they've given so many gems and so many nuggets of wisdom that will help you along your journey in writing. If you haven't seen them all, it's okay. Go catch up on what you haven't seen. And if you have seen them all, go on and watch them again. As my husband tells me, he watches movies like 5 or 6 times because each time he gets a different message or he sees something that he didn't see the first or the second time. So going back, catch up, find out what you missed. All right. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next season of Pen the Writer's Utopia. I love you guys. Thank you so much for your support during our first season. I truly, truly appreciate you. Once again, Alexis, I'm grateful. Thank you so much for joining me and giving your profound wisdom. But that's all for tonight, guys. See you guys next season. Love you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.